Hey, everybody. Welcome to the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, what we do on this podcast is talk about what B2B sales and marketing leaders, operators, and experts are doing today to really break through and grow their businesses at exponential levels. Let's get it in the interview. At the end, I'll give you an update on my courses, and you can check out my website at b2brevenue.com, and it's Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Hey, Stephen, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks, Brian, very much for the invitation. First of all, I appreciate it. It's just an honor to be with you and in your audience. And gosh, I don't know that I'm that unique and different from your audience. I've Predictive ROI is the company that I own today. It's the fifth business that I've owned, and I've written a few books. And Predictive at its core is a digital marketing, content marketing, agency. But really, what we focus on is helping business owners, executives, become thought leaders or take their existing thought leadership even deeper across multiple channels, whether that's voice or video or whatever. And been doing it for quite some time. And I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. My grandfather immigrated here from Istanbul, Turkey, and I come from a family of Greek immigrants, and we sort of hacked it out of the wilderness early on, and come from a restaurant background, and spent 4 years in the service, and right out of high school, but owning a business, building business, culture, employees, teamwork, serving clients and so forth is just something that has always been part of my DNA, because that's what my family has done for the last several generations.
Yeah. And what made you start your most recent company?
Here again, I think probably many of your listeners are going to maybe nod their heads and say, oh gosh, that was me too. Sort of happened by accident. I was for 6 years, before starting Predictive ROI, for 6 years, I was at the University of Wisconsin, specifically at the La Crosse, Wisconsin campus, so UW La Crosse. But I taught throughout the state. And during those teachings, I had an opportunity to write my first book, which was called The Small Business Owner's Handbook to Search Engine Optimization. And then through that process, I started getting consulting offers and speaking things and this and that. And for a while I said, nah, thanks, but no thanks. And I didn't ever want there to be an issue, with the university and conflicts of interest and that kind of stuff. And then eventually it got to a point where I was like, well, that really does sound like an interesting project. And so, I did a little project and did another little project. And then pretty soon I decided that, I think there's something here, and I kind of want to do that. But I left the university thinking that it was just going to be an opportunity to write more books and do more speaking. And what Predictive ROI has turned into, far surpasses what I ever would have imagined. And so that's really kind of how it started by accident. I wrote a couple books and people started reaching out, and I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. So anyway, that's how it started.
So predictive seems to be one of those keywords that's very successful in the book space. What or how do people become predictive in the revenue generation?
Yeah, I think I would love to say that it's really complicated and there's all these fancy algorithms that we use. And
but have to learn square roots.
Right. Yeah. But it really isn't. And really what it is about, being really clear. I think Stephen Covey said it best in habit number 2, begin with the end in mind, and getting really, really clear about not only the vital priorities that a business owner or company are trying to pursue and gaining clarity around that, but then also what are the vital metrics that they use, KPIs, OKRs. I don't care what sort of acronym you want to use, but essentially what are the data points that we use to determine if we're on track. And if we have those, and if we know what the performance metrics are, and we know that when it's like this, it's green, and when it's like that, it's red, well, how can we do more green stuff? And then what are the things we need to do to fit into that? Does it then become a predictive, repeatable, measurable model? It does. It doesn't mean that it works perfectly, or that some of the predictions are aren't askew, because life happens and business is not static. But being able to go into, whether we're talking about a marketing campaign or a thought leadership campaign or producing a podcast or a video series, but going into it with the end in mind certainly increases our ability to be successful by, a factor of 10 or whatever the factor is, because we've had that thoughtful planning at the onset.
And who's your typical client? Is there a particular niche that you found to really excel at, or a particular size of company?
Yep, absolutely. We actually call them Harry and Sally because I like that movie. Right, exactly.
Met Steven. Yeah.
for no other reason than that it's my second favorite movie of all time. But so in all seriousness, we call them Harry and Sally, and they typically in their own right, they're business owners, and owning. Typically, it's a B2B professional services firm doing about $1 million to $20 million a year in revenue. And unfortunately, Sally doesn't know a good idea from a bad idea. And it isn't because she's not smart. She's brilliant. I mean, obviously, she's built a very successful business with a team and clients and taking care of all the crazy bag of cats that goes along with that. But unfortunately, she doesn't know a good idea from a bad idea, because there's this deluge of stuff. There's this knowledge and information and expertise and all these thought leaders trying to hit her and tell her what she needs to do. And it's hard to discern all of that. So really what she's looking for is a team of people who, that she can trust, that she knows that they have her best interests at heart, who really want to get in to help her build her business around her thought leadership, help her generate revenue from that content, so that she can do a better job in front of her team and her customers and prospects and be more helpful to them. And so that's our ideal prospect, somebody who's running a B2B professional services firm, because we know that we can then use the things that we do really well with voice and video and LinkedIn, lead gen, and all of that stuff to really be helpful to Sally.
And who is their typical market? Is it bigger companies, or is it any particular niche on that side that you feel that you really have something extra to bring?
Not necessarily the end customer for Sally, because typically that will run the gamut. What we do see is Harry and Sally fitting in a couple of buckets for us, whether they might be agency owners just like us. They might be, they might be running recruiting firms. They might be running CPA firms or accounting firms or architects. Yeah. So they're in those categories. As far as, their end customer, as long as they are B2B, that's a good fit for us. Right. So, as far as like if Sally is selling through to like B2C, that tends not to be a good fit for us, because then we might not be able to use LinkedIn and the full suite of tools there, or some of the other research that we like to do, because B2B are just easier, more well-defined markets for us to really understand and then, quite frankly, to influence.
And on the content side, what do you see working today that's changed over the last couple of years?
I think now more than ever, but certainly what we're seeing is just this explosion, of course, of channels. Like, we're on this podcast interview right now. But what we're seeing is an even greater emphasis on that for a business owner or an executive to really be leading that company and be the face of that company. They truly need to have some clarity around their point of view and their own thought leadership. And if they don't have that and they're expecting a marketing team to drive demand, is that possible today? Well, of course it is. But what we're really seeing is this big shift in, executives and business owners becoming thought leaders, whether that means having a book or having a podcast or having a video series. And I don't necessarily mean like the Gary V type vlog every day with cameras following them around. Not that that's a bad model, but not everybody can execute that, right? Gary has a unique set of talents and skills. But I do mean is that business owners getting really, really clear about why they do what they do, kind of like Simon Sinek said, finding their why, why they do what they do, who they do it for, and who they don't do it for, and then how they can be helpful, and then developing thought leadership around that, and producing cornerstone content on a consistent basis around that thought leadership, and then being able to drive revenue from it, because that is entirely possible today, essentially turning themselves and their companies into media companies. And I think that's a really, really interesting model. And as we're seeing, as more and more channels are coming in this proliferation of channels, being really channel agnostic is going to become, it already is, super, super important.
But I mean, certainly they've some have been more effective than others, and like let's take LinkedIn, for example, where like Pulse 2 years ago was the thing.
Right. And
today it's essentially worthless.
Yep.
Because it doesn't go into everyone's feed. It's just another element. And all of a sudden, long form posts as a text post are working. But a lot of people, that has to be time-based. The algorithms are changing so fast, it's really hard to adapt to them.
Yeah, this is such a great point that you're bringing to your audience, and really illustrates why you need to be a channel agnostic. Because if you'd built an audience all around Pulse, using your example, and like you were really dominating that, right? You're getting tens of thousands of views and likes a lot and comments and shares and all of that, and then it dies.
Right.
Well, and your audience is all on LinkedIn, you're screwed. Right.
Yeah.
But if you've built a podcast, as you have, and you're available in iTunes and Google Play and iHeart and Stitcher and Spotify and Alexa and all of these different channels, so the channels are agnostic. Your content is available all of those channels, and your website and so forth. Then you're truly channel agnostic, because your content then survives across all of those channels, no matter what their listening preference might be. And so if your audience looks to you as the example of, okay, Brian has created this great cornerstone content on a consistent basis, and he's built an audience, but he's done it across all of these channels, that's the way to win.
I agree with you there. But I've seen people like go from, the 2,000 to 3,000 followers on LinkedIn to hundreds of thousands during the Pulse heydays.
Sure.
Where people were posting once a day, and it was just on fire. And they got book deals out of it, and then it stopped like a brick wall.
Yep.
And, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen the channel transfer that you would think would happen. Meaning,
you mean as far as like where all those people went?
Well, no. But what I mean is like, okay, if they were super popular in Pulse, which is a written blog, but no one went to their website and read their blog, and then they write a book and no one buys the book. Then they start, right? Because I've seen it where, I started on like YouTube, and it was like mediocre stuff. I had written a book and I was trying to use YouTube as a promotion, and then I had started a podcast 9 years ago, but then all of a sudden when the smartphones became popular, podcasting did, and I was early, right? And you see who the successful bloggers are, and even your example about Gary Vee, it was like he hit YouTube and Twitter at the right time with a counterintuitive message about wine, and he maxed that out very well. And even he does not transfer from one medium to another very well. He's very much a video guy.
I agree. Yep. And so that's where I think this is a great example of why somebody truly does need to be, in my opinion, channel agnostic. So like if one of your listeners right now is thinking, okay, Brian's got a show, I have a show. Great. And if that listener is taking that episode where they interview a guest, just like you're interviewing me, and they take that and they slice and dice it, and then it becomes an article into Entrepreneur where, there's an audience, or Inc. is a contribution, or it becomes a series of social posts. So it's like one piece of content then stretches across all of those channels. So you are protected that if another Pulse happens to go belly up, and then that algorithm is no longer friendly. Just like Facebook has kind of warned us, and not really warned us, has shown us that it is quickly becoming very much a pay to play type model. Any sort of organic, right, off of your Facebook business page is like non-existent. So I think we're seeing all of this sort of change in the platforms, which is why it's becoming so, in my opinion, critically important to be channel agnostic and making sure we're taking one piece of content and slicing and dicing so we show our thought leadership across multiple channels, because the ground is always shifting and we have to be ready for that.
I agree with that completely. What I was trying to elicit is like there's certain audiences that are favoring certain mediums. And certainly, it varies upon generation and things. But it's like on the sales side, nothing works but audio.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, I sold 100 times as much on Audible as I did on Amazon of my book.
Oh, congratulations. Wow. Nice.
And I tell all the sales authors that I deal with, it's like, and they go, is it worth putting it on Audible? I go, is it worth putting on Amazon is the question you should ask yourself. And they're like, why? And I go, think about it. Salespeople, have you ever seen a salesperson sit down and read a book? I mean, but they're always in their car. They're walking around. They do consume, new sales information, but they want to do it passively. And that's the beauty of podcasting, is that you don't have to sit at a screen or hold something. You can just, mow the lawn or walk the dog or run or whatever while you're doing it. And, so I think that is something when you're dealing with a client, it's like, what do their clients, how do they consume content?
Yeah, and I think that you just gave your audience there the ultimate question, right? So then, because if they want to consume it in long form written and you've only made it available on audio in Audible, then obviously that's a mismatch. But you asking that $1 million strategic question is a question that all of business owners and leaders should be thinking about. What are the channels of where my audience is? And then how can I be channel agnostic across all of those to make sure that one piece of content makes it look like I'm actually touching all of those, but I'm really not.
Right. And how about the pay to play? Does it make sense in cases to promote your content on things like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn or?
I think it goes back to the question that we're kind of teasing out here that you asked. Is like if the audience, let's say that the owner of a manufacturing operation is listening right now, does it make sense for them to be advertising large pieces of capital equipment with a Facebook post?
Right? No,
probably not. Might not make sense. Does it make sense for them to advertise something like that, whether it's a special session or something within the industry, like an industry networking group that they might promote in LinkedIn to specific people who they know are attending an industry event, and they're going to be at the event as a sponsor, and they're going to use LinkedIn in a very strategic way to invite people to that kind of VIP thing that they're doing as a way that they're going to launch that new product? Does that make sense? Sure. Yeah. Does it make sense then to write some long form content that's around that, do a webinar in front of the event? Maybe. But so there's certainly ways to bolt social or bolt the channels onto other things that they're doing offline. But I think you got to use that same, or ask yourself that same question that you asked all of us. And that's, how are the end users or the customers or prospects consuming that content? And then pay attention to that.
Yeah. And what type of pushback do you get? Because what I typically hear is this is a lot of work, and it's even a whole lot more work to do it right.
Yeah. Well, for us, if we're receiving that kind of pushback, then that's probably not the right Harry and Sally for us.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And because, one of our core values is we can always be better. And that doesn't mean that, we're perfectionists or that we never pull the trigger on something, but we always want to do it the right way. Even if that means we have to redo something at our own cost, we want to make sure that it's right and that it's something that the client can be proud of. So, I think it's just that's the litmus test for us, and maybe even exposing a mismatch.
Yeah. And how long does this take to go through? What's your typical engagement?
It ranges. Sometimes one of a prospective client will say, I'm kind of leery about this whole thought leadership thing, and gosh, could we start for 6 months and then renew after that? And in certain circumstances, we'll say, sure. Typically, it's 12 months.
Yeah.
That we'll work with somebody through, because as you well know, it'll probably take us 5 to 6 months to get some traction. Right. And so, we're typically creating, annual type campaigns.
And do you do the production of the content, or do you do the curation of it, or just the coaching?
No, we do both. Or I guess all three, that you just mentioned there. So yeah, we certainly help on the strategy front, on the onset, and whether that feels like coaching or strategic planning, whatever bucket you want to put that in, there's a lot of that in the front end of it. And then certainly as far as producing the content and so forth, we have a team of experts, full-time folks here at Predictive that are doing that kind of stuff. Because as you know too, as you get closer to a launch, there are things that just happen, like holy bananas, we got to do that thing that we forgot about or whatever, and so you just need a team of dedicated people who are at the ready to do that.
Yeah. And where do you see this space going in the next 2 to 3 years? I mean, if you were to bet on either one platform or one strategy, what would it be?
Gosh, isn't that like the $1 billion question?
I ask it myself every day, because I said, like, what did I bet on 3 years ago that was a waste of time? Or what did I miss? Right. I missed Pulse. I mean, I was at the very back end of it, and writing wasn't my bag, so it was never a good match. But
I think that I don't know if it's necessarily channel, but I think we're seeing even more and more go toward video.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we're big proponents of audio. I have my own show and all of that, and we produce a lot of podcasts. But what we're seeing right now is clients, prospects coming to us and saying, I do want to have a show, but a podcast, but I also want to have video. I really want to rock it on YouTube. And obviously YouTube's not new, right? It's been around since 2006. I get that. But we're seeing more and more thought leaders say, I want to have a video presence. And so now what we've been doing is producing podcasts as the cornerstone piece of content, and then slicing and dicing that. Now essentially what we're going to be producing more of is video as the cornerstone piece of content, and then from that we take a podcast, from that we take an article for Entrepreneur, from that we take a blog post, an email campaign, the content for a webinar, and all of that. So I think that that's probably more of the shift, is that we're going to see video taking more of the driver's seat as opposed to secondary position.
Yeah, because I'm seeing video certainly not almost dominate LinkedIn right now. That it is very popular, very powerful, and the algorithm is supporting it. And I see podcasting I see is very powerful, but it's getting super crowded, and what I'm hearing is a lot of people are having a hell of a time building an audience for it.
Mm.
I don't know whether it's just there's so many options now, or the number of options is outpacing the number of consumers as far as growth. But and I'm seeing blogs just kind of really take a back seat. I don't know if that's what you're seeing.
Yeah, we're seeing all of those things, but what we are seeing too, and what we're really encouraging our clients to consider, even though it's counterintuitive, because so many of them will hear, I need to have 1 million downloads in a month, and no, actually, if you have about 8,000 downloads a month, 9,000 downloads a month, you're in the top 5% of all podcasts, according to Libsyn. And so great, right? And you can have that with a niche audience. And if you have a niche audience, that opens you up to so many opportunities with sponsorship and so forth, as opposed to trying to serve a broader business audience, which is where it is red ocean. However, with that said, the Brians are still going to rise to the top because they have great content. And as you well know, most podcasts, even though there's a lot of them, most of them are bad.
Yeah, that's for sure. That is, and they don't last. And they are. I mean, they say 6 episodes or something is the average length. Yep. And you can see it. They come out real strong and then
I'm going to dominate this channel. I'm going to dominate. Yeah. And then they figure out, oh, holy crap, Brian's been doing this for a really long time. And dang, that's a lot of work. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Hey, so where do people go to learn about you, what you're doing, and connect with you?
Well, you can find us at predictiveroi.com. That's kind of our hub for everything. And our podcast, which is called Onward Nation, is certainly linked there as well. And we're just about ready to air our 800th interview. And we've been doing it for a while, and just like you, I mean, we're committed to it and being excellent at it. So I just really appreciate the invitation, Brian. It was very kind of you, and it was fun spending some time with you.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Hey, I want to make sure you're checking out b2brevenue.com. That is where you can get a free copy of an ebook that I did. It's a real ebook. It's not a fluff book. It shows and talks about how companies make buying decisions and how you can influence that from both a marketing and a sales standpoint, how to find all the people that are in the decision path and what they need to see, know, and touch and feel before they make a product selection. If your team needs some coaching, some help, some training, some systems, some processes that do work today, because we know what doesn't work, or what doesn't work, I'll show you what does work and how to connect and get into pretty much any account. It includes deal coaching and content community, and I can customize it for your particular company. Just go to b2brevenue.com, look under training, schedule a call with me. We can talk it over, or just sign up. You can pay per month or all at once, whichever makes most sense for your budget. Also, I put out videos pretty much daily on LinkedIn and on YouTube. On LinkedIn, it's Brian G. Burns, and on YouTube, it's Brian Burns Sales. Just search for that if you like to consume some video content. And if you see me on LinkedIn, please put a comment and a share and a like on some of the videos. I really appreciate it. I've got a company page for each podcast. This one, the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, where I put both content and humor videos out daily. And tell a friend about the podcast. Really appreciate you listening. Check out the show notes for all the partners and the connections you can make there, the coupon codes for the products to evaluate them, see if they're a right match for you. And we'll see you next time.